Hello, my name is Paolo Veneri and I am the head of the Territorial Analysis and Statistics Unit at the OECD Center for Entrepreneurship, SMEs, Regions and Cities. I'm very pleased to be speaking to you on this occasion for the Strength to Diversities project, fifth policy forum in the Canary Islands. Today, I will give you a short and focused overview of our extensive work on regions and cities that we carry out here at the OECD. More specifically, I will give you some insight from our 2018 edition of the report called OECD Regions and Cities at a Glance that you can see in my hand. Basically, the report was released in October 2018, and it shows how regions and cities are progressing towards stronger economies, better lives for people, and more inclusive societies. It provides a comparative pictures of trends in economic growth and people well-being, and on how such trends are changing across regions, also within the countries. There is a specific focus also on migration, on migrants, and how they are integrated in their local and regional societies. And for this purpose, specific indicators have been created and compared with indicators referred to the native-born population. So the first message I would like to stress is that the socioeconomic conditions that drives people well-being are starkly different within countries. This is true in many domains of people's life, from well-being to employment to jobs, income, but also education and health, for example. And these differences are also between groups of population. When it comes to educational attainment of the workforce, this is certainly not an exception of these disparities. For example, in 6 OECD countries, the regional gap in the proportion of the workforce with at least upper secondary education can be up to 20 percentage points, which is a huge difference. However, the good news is that since the turn of the millennium, so in the last 17 years approximately, these regional gaps in the proportion of the workforce with upper secondary education have decreased in most OECD countries, even if there are exceptions, of course. In the case of France, for example, Canada and Greece, these are countries that experienced the highest decreases in the regional gaps, with decreases from almost 16 percentage points in France to almost 8 percentage points in Greece. In contrast, as I just said, there are some exceptions. For example, in the case of New Zealand or Spain, where actually these gaps increased. There is a difference when the gap decreases and increases. When it decreases, generally this comes from the fact that the regions that were lagging behind are actually catching up. It's a natural phenomenon also, given the demographic structure of the population. On the other hand, the countries that are increasing the regional gaps, this is due mainly to the fact that there are specific regions that are already concentrating the highly skilled people that are keeping attracting the highly skilled population. And this is connected to a second point, a second message that I would like to stress, which is the fact that urban places are keeping being attractive for population, especially youth and especially highly skilled population. If we classify the regions across the OECD in urban regions, rural regions and somewhat mixed regions, then we can say that urban regions account for almost 80% of all in-country youth migration over the last 3 years. That basically means that among the young people who moved residence within the same country, so people who changed regions in the last 3 years, then 80% went to a city. This, in terms of numbers, actually consists of almost 22 million people in 32 OECD countries for which we have the data, that each year during the last 3 years moved residence, and amounts to, the population who moves amounts to approximately 2% of the population. But this share can actually change, can be up to 5% in some countries like Korea or Hungary, or less than 1% like in Slovak Republic. These patterns of urban concentration is not only for the total population, but is particularly strong for migrants. Migrants, actually, according to our data, 2/3 of the foreign-born population in OECD regions are located in regions that have large urban agglomerations inside. This is 6 percentage points higher than for the native-born population. So migrants tend to be more concentrated. And actually, tertiary educated migrants, so migrants with high skills, are even more concentrated. They tend to be, the highest proportion of the highly skilled migrants tend to be in the largest cities and in particular to the capital regions. And this is particularly true in specific countries, for example, in Mexico, Australia, and the United States, and also Ireland. Actually, if you take all the foreign-born population in these capitals, at least 50% have a tertiary educational attainment. So, which means that actually these cities are particularly attractive for the young and skilled migrants. The location of the most educated migrants tend to reflect also the location of the most educated foreign-born. They tend to follow the same patterns overall. But also in this, when it comes to education, when it comes to migrants, we can also highlight that there are also gender gaps, which has a spatial component in a way, a regional component. For example, in some regions in Greece, in some regions in Italy or Poland or Turkey, actually the proportion of highly educated women can be up to 10 percentage points higher than for men. But besides that, in these countries, the female participation in the labor market is lower than for men. The participation of migrant women in the labor market is a key element for their social integration and overall well-being. In the OECD, on average, the employment rate of the female foreign-born is almost 8 percentage points lower than for female native-born. Only in 14% of the regions, foreign-born women display better or similar outcomes in terms of employment than the female native-born. Overall, gender differences in employment rates are larger for migrant women than for native-born women, generating regional disparities in this type of indicator. Overall, while migration policy remains a national responsibility, central and local authorities are important. Also because integration needs to happen where people are, in their neighborhoods, in their regions, in their schools. And local authorities, while coordinating with all other levels of government and other local partners, play a key role in integrating the newcomers and empowering them to contribute to their new societies, the new communities. The recent increase in the new arrivals have highlighted some governance weaknesses for both the short-term and the long-term responses to migration and to integration. Such weaknesses often stem from the lack of coordination across among policies across different sectors, such as education, labor, health, housing, as well as across levels of government. And there is a need, of course, to break these policy silos in designing coherent responses also at the local level. Given its cross-cutting nature, policies for migrant integration can work as an opportunity, can be an opportunity and a catalyst for public sector innovation by bringing together decision makers at different levels of government and different sectors with the ambition of identifying new governance approaches, which are also valuable for building more resilient communities for all groups, including past migrants and other vulnerable groups. Thank you for your attention.